All right, Hunter, that seems the natural place to start when we're talking freshmen. We're going to go to Duke. You guys beat Duke in Vegas at the end of November. Cooper Flagg, everybody talks about, rightfully so, the defensive versatility, the competitiveness, the passing. We've seen major escalations in his creation and his shooting since you guys played him. But what was your big takeaway back in November?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway in November was just how, like you said, versatile he is, but also his scoring. Coming in, everybody talked about how versatile he was and how good of a defender he was. But I think the biggest surprise this year has been his scoring and how well that's translated. A lot of people try to knock him on his jump shot and his mechanics and everything like that, but he's been an elite level scorer, averaging almost 20 points in the ACC, which isn't, the best conference in the world, but it's a high level conference, and for him to be able to do that just shows to his potential and the reason why he's probably going to be the number one pick in this draft.
All right, now be honest. Were you sitting on the spin move? Were you expecting it?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew that that was one of his go-to moves. I forget who, I think it was Coach Rob, who was doing his scout, and that was a big thing of his is whenever he likes to drive, he likes to spin. So KJ definitely knew about that. That was his main matchup at the time, and so we definitely had scouted that one out for sure.
All right. Now I do think he's become less predictable with that as he's become more aware that people were anticipating it. But Knueppel in that game was 0 for 8 from behind the 3-point line, but he was arguably their primary facilitator. He's someone that I have higher in my mock than others do, just because I think the offensive versatility, he can shoot it. Although we didn't make threes against you guys, he's almost up to 38% now. He can pass it. He knows how to play, understands spacing. He's got some on-off ball versatility. What were your impressions of him back in November?
Yeah, I would say Adam, the biggest thing about him for the NBA is there's never going to be enough shooting in the NBA. And I think that's, the biggest thing he's going to provide for teams. But the thing that gave us the most trouble and the thing that they ran, almost, continuously at the end of the game was their ball screen with him and Cooper Flagg, which I think is super tough because what are you going to do? Are you going to switch it? You can't go under because you got one of the best shooters in the country. It's hard to go over because, he's so big and strong that he can get downhill really easily and put a guard in jail. So I think for him, just continuing on being a playmaker, especially off the bounce. And then I think defensively for him would probably be, the biggest area for improvement. But I agree. He's going to be obviously a one and done, but I definitely think a lottery pick. And I definitely think he's got a lot of NBA potential, especially with that jump shot. Because like I said earlier, 3-point shooting is never going to be enough in the NBA.
Now, one freshman who you gave fits that game was Khaman Maluach. Obviously, he came in with a ton of expectations. He's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the defense. But you really gave him a lot of problems that game. What did you do to accomplish that? And did that lead to any big takeaways for you on his game?
I knew going in that, I mean, he was definitely a lob threat. He's very athletic, super long athlete. And so that's something that we tried to make sure, definitely in the pick and roll, was to, try to limit his lob threats, especially when you got guys like Cooper Flagg and Khan and Tyrese Proctor coming off ball screens. They're super dynamic. So we got to get out there on the hedge and really make it hard for him to see that pass and try to have more of the skip passes. And so just he's a little bit raw offensively, but that's due to his age. He's only going to get better with age, and he'll develop, especially at Duke with Coach Shire. I already know he's probably gotten even better since we played him, and so that's something that he's going to continue to develop is post hooks and all that. But it was definitely kind of stopping him. Offensive rebounding was a big thing, but also just that lob threat was probably the biggest thing. Don't let him get too deep in his role. Try to chuck him early and slow down his roll.
All right. Now, also in November, you guys played Carolina. That was at your place. You won that one. I believe it was 92-89. They've got a couple of big-time freshmen themselves. It's ironic. Ian Jackson, he had 10 points in your game, but he was not playing the same role then as he is now. He's become their second leading scorer. In that game, he only played 10 minutes off the bench. Did you see this coming in terms of, hey, why isn't this guy playing more at that point in time?
Yeah, I kind of realized, in that game because he was making some tough shots. Like you could just see the potential for his shot making in that game. Like you said, he didn't play that many minutes, and that was probably just due to the fact that, it was the beginning of the season. They were still trying to figure out rotations and everything like that, as every coach and every team is. But I could see that he was going to be a dynamic piece for UNC. And I think he can't play enough minutes out there. He's a freshman guard. They already have three really good guards, and that kind of makes it tough for him. But, I think Hubert Davis is starting to realize that you just got to play your best players at the end of the day. And when Seth Trumbull came out with injury and he had to play extended minutes, he was averaging, 20 points a game. And I think, that's the main reason why he's going to be a first round pick in this year's draft is because of his, shot creation and his scoring ability.
Now, let me ask you this because I think one of the criticisms on Ian, and I am and have been an Ian fan since he was an underclassman in high school. But scouts are concerned about the assist rate. He's averaging under an assist per game. He does have a tendency to hunt shots. Is that something that you guys were able to game plan for, or in a role that was more limited then, was that not as big a point of emphasis?
Yeah, I mean, the point of emphasis was him. With him was definitely just, he's coming in to score. That's what he's been known for in high school. But also, that's probably his role on the team. I mean, you have a point guard in Elliot Cadeau that's one of the best facilitators in the country. Getting high assists pretty much every game. And when you have a guy like that, like we have a guy like DeJuan Harris who is the same way, who's a really good facilitator. He's coming off the screen, coming in the lane, looking to kick. He's looking for assist. And so, when guys like that pass the ball, you really want to, try to be aggressive out there because you know that, he's always looking for you. So I would assume that that's kind of Ian's role on the team is to try to be that scorer and be that shot creator alongside RJ Davis and Seth Trimble.
All right, now let's talk about Drake Powell because he was also a 5-star incoming freshman, but you got familiar with him this summer at the Nike Skills Academy. He played 20 minutes in that opening game, hasn't really ascended quite as much as Ian, but truthfully, that was pretty consistent with what we expected coming out of high school. Given your experience with him, both playing against him and being in camp with him this summer, what are your impressions of Drake Powell?
Yeah, at that camp, Drake was on my team for a good amount of the camp. So I was able to see, just his personality and his character. He's still super young, but I think defensively, what impressed me the most with him was just his natural instincts defensively. I think he's able to guard 1 through 4 pretty well. And when you're a versatile defender like that, the NBA will always have a role for you. But in college, I think one thing he needs to develop is that outside shot. He's really athletic, and so being able to get downhill, I think, will be really helpful for him right now. But I think the reason why he's so highly rated is his defensive tools. And I think just that overall athleticism gives him a lot of potential.
No doubt about that. Currently 67% from the free throw line. He's up over 37% from the 3-point line. So that shooting has continued to trend up in the last couple of months. Want to ask you about a couple of bigs that you have gone against in recent weeks. Let's start at Arizona State. Jayden Quaintance is averaging 3 blocks per game. Now, he is an interesting one because he's too young to be one and done eligible. My question for you is, how impressed were you with his defensive instincts?
I'm super impressed for a guy who's so young. He's really got great instincts. He's almost like a cornerback, free safety out there. I think his best attribute that I think is really underrated, post entries. He's really good at defending post entries. That's something that we really made a key point when we were scouting him was that you can't be lazy on your steal. You got to really attack the ball when the guard throws it to you because he does a really good job of coming around and getting good deflections. I think that's something that's really underlooked in his game, and that's one of his best defensive attributes. But the athleticism and the shot blocking, he's a freak athlete, and so he's really able to protect the rim. I think Arizona State almost funnels the ball to him because they know how good he is in the pick and roll when he's hedging or if he's out there guarding. He's able to get beat because he's so athletic and so good at timing shots. He's able to get beat and still be able to block shots. So he's a freak athlete, and whenever he comes out, probably next year, he'll be a top pick for sure.
Yeah, averaging over 4 stocks per game. As a quick follow-up to that, Hunter, does he get more defensive freedom than other bigs you've gone against? That's been a narrative in the media, and I'm just curious from a player's perspective, is there ever a time when you're like, wow, they really let him go out there and roam versus someone who plays a more confined defensive role? Is there any legitimacy to that media narrative?
With him, I don't think so. I think, when you're such a big presence in the paint, I didn't see it in that game. I would say that they kind of play him more at the 4 Like when we played them, they had their other big man guarding me, and he was kind of guarding KJ. So I think that allows for him to a little bit, like you said, roam more. We kind of have that with KJ, where he's the four man, but we kind of switch 1 through 4 depending on the matchup, and we kind of let him roam and kind of be that free safety back there to where if if he sees somebody beat, he can kind of just leave his man and go, stun at the ball and try to make the defender kind of pick it up and stuff like that, and kind of play that free safety role. So I do see what they're saying with that, but I don't see it as much as guys like KJ Adams on my team or a guy like Cooper Flagg, where they're really going around the court and kind of causing havoc.
Very interesting. Want to ask you about another big guy, and that is at UCF, Moustapha Thiam. He was someone who reclassed up late. We had him as a 5-star prospect in what would have been this senior class of high school, and I think he's really playing some good basketball as of late. He plays a very translatable role because he's a rim protector. He can run the floor. He can be a lob threat. You've seen him twice now. So 2-part question. What did you see from him? And was there a notable progression from the first game to the second game?
Yeah, I would say there was definitely a notable progression. I think in the second game, he was a lot more confident. In the first game, he was kind of hesitant, especially with his jump shots. I think in the second game, whether it was the coaches or the players or himself, he really had a confidence in him that we didn't see in the first game. And especially with the mid-range and three-pointers, he took 5 threes, only made one, but still that's the aggressiveness that he didn't have in the first game. And like you said, he's a lob threat rim protector that does a really good job at his job. And I could see the progression from the first game to the second game where the UCF guards are so athletic and so really good at being their men one-on-one, where they're going to require a lot of help and a lot of attention. And I think he'll be able to make a lot of easy baskets just playing off his guards.
How concerned were you about that shooting potential when it comes to like how attached you had to stay pick and roll, or the extent to which you were going to close out to him on the perimeter?
Yeah, our game plan was to kind of not let him shoot, but that was kind of the matchup that we were willing to, take some shots because they're so dynamic with Keyshawn and Darius Johnson. I mean, Keyshawn had 34 last night versus us. Darius Johnson had 13 early, and so we were kind of trying to limit them as much as we could. And then we also know, just the rest of their guards are super dynamic. So you kind of got to give up something, and that was kind of what we were living with was that mid-range jump shot. Uh, Unfortunately, he made a lot of them, but he also missed 4 threes, which we were willing to live with. And that's kind of what you got to do in college. You can't stop everything. There's some shots that you're willing to live with more than others, and that was something that we were willing to live with. Obviously, no lobs or anything like that, nothing close to the rim, but just because of their guards were so dynamic, we had to try to live with those mid-range jump shots.
One more on him. What'd you think of his hands?
He has large hands, but I think he did a good job of catching balls. I mean, as a freshman, especially somebody who reclassed up, the game can be really fast, even though now we're, kind of in the mid-season. And coaches always say, if you're a freshman, you're no longer a freshman now because you have so much experience. But for him to be able to get in here and average what he's averaging as a should-be senior in high school, it's super impressive.
All right, last player I want to ask you about. He's playing as well as anyone, probably anyone not named Cooper Flagg in the last month, and that's VJ Edgecombe. You guys are preparing for Baylor this weekend. VJ was known as probably the best athlete in high school basketball a year ago with a ton of translatable defensive upside. We've seen some very significant offensive growth from him, though, in recent weeks. He's shooting the ball at an unprecedented level. We're seeing him score in high volume very consistently in the last 3 or 4 weeks. What goes into preparing for VJ Edgecombe when he's playing like he is now?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing early on when we were watching Baylor, when I was watching Baylor, I was seeing that, his offensive game, he was just struggling a little bit. And I think that's the translation to college. Like, it's just a little bit harder, but he's really found his groove. Like you said, his shooting's gone up. I think he's being more aggressive. And I think you're seeing a new Baylor team with him. That's the reason why they were so highly ranked was, everybody expected him to come out the gates firing, but there's always a transition to college. And he's felt that a little bit, but he's thriving right now. And he'll definitely be a big test for us just because of his athleticism. And like you said, his defensive instincts playing in the passing lanes. He'll definitely be a big test for us.
All right. Well, that's going to be a fun one to watch this weekend, Kansas and Baylor. Hunter, as always, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks, Adam.